Joining me live is Shadow Climate Change and Energy Minister Ted O'Brien. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us this morning. So yes, the offshore wind farm, locals haven't been too impressed. Are they satisfied now, do you think?
Good morning, Janie. I think there are communities on the Central Coast there, like Nora Head, who should be banking this as a win because they had to really get together, coordinate some pretty serious political activism to ensure the minister heard their views. I can't speak for all other communities that will be impacted. I think the main thing, though, Janie, is it shouldn't have come to this. I mean, you can't have a proposal for a major offshore wind farm zone and not consult properly with locals. And that's what happened. And that's why you saw local communities having to rally themselves and protest. This is no way to run a transition, and it's going to end in tears if the Albanese government just keeps steamrolling over locals.
We heard some similar comments from the Vice President of the National Farmers Federation talking about the need for consultation and the way to get it right is you know, to talk about the hierarchy and not only just talking to locals but also assessing other things, including, you know, looking at cultural heritage and the like. In terms of wildlife, there is the possibility of wildlife being affected as well. What do you know regarding this?
I think there is serious concern. The locals have already spoken to me about their concerns around bird life and around ocean life, in particular the whales. I mean, I don't know if you know that part of the coast, but it is spectacular and people flock there. And so, you know, there's two concerns here. One is for the animals themselves, and secondly, commercially, for local communities, their economies rely on tourism. And the more government rushes these things and doesn't take it into account, you are going to have unforeseen consequences, and it'll be everyday Australians that pay the price. And this is why they are speaking up. This is why they're complaining. And hopefully the government can learn some lessons from this. Stop rushing and steamrolling over local communities. They're not going to cop it. Australians don't cop that, and nor should they.
It sounds like a fair argument, Shadow Minister Ted O'Brien, but when you look at the impact of how fast we need to move to renewables and how dire the situation is, how fast do they need to move and how slow do they need to, you know, to assess things? Because I guess, I mean, I'm certainly no expert, but we've got the pressure to reduce emissions, but we also need to work on this quite quickly, you would imagine.
There's nobody with whom I spoke on the Central Coast there recently, and I was down there only a week or so ago. Nobody there was talking about we need to stop acting on climate change. On the contrary, they were saying absolutely we need to act, but this isn't the way to do it. You don't rush. I mean, the Albanese government set targets for 82% renewables by 2030 without doing any implementation planning, without doing any economic modelling. And this is what we have as a consequence. You can't be ideologically driven when you want to decarbonise. There's not one pathway to decarbonise. Albanese government thinks it is, and that is why it is now putting itself under pressure. It's set targets without doing their homework. Now they're under pressure to deliver on their self-imposed targets, which they've legislated, by the way. And so this is just self-harm. But it's one thing for a government to self-harm. But when that harm affects the Australian people, that's where it's not on. I think they botched it, they botched the transition, and once you breach faith with the Australian people, it's only going to get harder. I think they need to pause and actually take Australia in a very different path to decarbonisation. We can decarbonise, but it shouldn't come at such a cost of local communities, let alone the power bills, which are skyrocketing. Again, a symptom of their very wrong plan.
We have to wrap it up, but I do want to quickly ask you, the World Meteorological Organisation has confirmed that an El Nino event is unfolding, with much of eastern Australia expecting warmer and dry conditions. How is the government preparing, or needs to prepare, do you think, for this, which has the potential for increased bushfires and drought, particularly across eastern Australia?
Well, of course, the government needs to take the advice and start taking preparatory action. Again, even from an energy perspective, if you like, it just shows you weather changes, conditions change. The more you have a system which closes down base load power and putting in place a system which is entirely weather dependent, well, you're at the mercy of the gods. But we do know that that advice is coming down as to what season we might be moving into, and the government just has to plan, which is not good act, plan before then taking mitigation actions.
Ted O'Brien, Shadow Climate Change and Energy Minister, thank you so much for your time.